Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane, and it's the morning of Wednesday, the 5th of June, 2019. And it's an absolutely glorious morning here on the southeastern edge of Dartmoor, just in the lee of Haytor. Beautiful view out into the English Channel, looking down the Tin Valley. And, well, I'm going to head down to Widdicombe for some breakfast later this morning. Anyway, title of this morning's broadcast is this the seismic shift we have been waiting for? Well, if you want to cut short, then the short answer is probably not. But let's take a look at what's occurring right now. Because obviously we have a visit from Trump, and the reception that he is receiving is certainly very interesting. The left response is something to behold. The aggression is unbelievable. And sadly, Jeremy Corbyn, you are going to be remembered by history as the man who had the opportunity in the palm of his hands to take the helm of the UK and blew it. You blew it 35 years in Parliament, and basically the level and magnitude of your naivety will keep academics amused for probably the next few decades, to say the least. There it was. There you had the Labour Party. Something like 500,000 people signed up for membership of the Labour Party when you took the reins, and when you were under pressure from the Blairites, and you had it right there in the palm of your hands, but then you blew it. Your inability to deal with the fake anti-Semitism claims, which of course Rupert Murdoch is driving on behalf of a certain Middle Eastern country, and he's not doing it just here in the UK, he's doing it everywhere where anybody has the audacity to put forward an agenda that he doesn't sign up to. And of course, Murdoch is very much trying to control the narrative right now. And, if you're like me, the only reason that you actually read these rags is to see what lies and deceit the media, the lamestream media, are pushing out to the masses. And then obviously when you hear people simply regurgitate what has been published in the media, then basically you're probably wasting your time and wasting oxygen. But the good news is that more and more people are simply reading these rags to see the magnitude of deception. And this is very reminiscent of the latter days of the Soviet Union, where fortunately the vast majority of people realized that pravda, truth, was anything but. And sadly, in the UK, we still got a situation where too many people think that what is published in the lamestream is in fact the gospel truth, when of course it's pretty much the exact opposite. So, Jeremy, I think it's adios to the Labour Party. You're about to be absolutely trounced in the Peterborough elections tomorrow. And, it's going to be difficult to see how you can hang on to the leadership of the Labour Party. And I'm sure you will. I'm sure your fingernails will be dug right into the board, hanging on there. But the reality is the Labour Party is history. It has lost connection with its traditional power base, i.e. the working classes. And, basically that means outside of London. If you're a Labour Party and you're a Metro, then you're not really Labour, are you? You're a Blairite. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we've got Momentum, literally pulling the rug out from sanity. So Labour Party, sorry, but for probably the next few years, you're absolutely out in the cold. And of course, Theresa May has done a very similar job for the Tories. But the likelihood is that Boris, who would seem to be very much the front runner, might just salvage something in terms of Middle England. But, that's not all good, is it? Because as I mentioned the other day, Boris is signed up to EU military unification. He made it very clear when he was the Foreign Secretary that he wouldn't be opposing the continued agenda of EU military unification. So it doesn't matter how you look at it, the Tory and the Labour Party have both completely failed to encapsulate the will of the people, and consequently that you're going to see the magnitude of that in Peterborough tomorrow. So you'll have seen it in the council elections, you've seen it in the EU elections, and now tomorrow you'll see it in Peterborough. And the reality is that if there was a general election tomorrow, and I'm not advocating that this is necessarily a good thing, but the Brexit Party would absolutely clean up. I mean, I did see an analysis, if you can call it that, in the Daily Express, which suggested that if there was a general election, then based on recent voting trends, Brexit Party would possibly end up with something like 400 MPs, which would be a massive majority. And I think that's probably the case if there was a general election right now, because the vast majority of people around the country want Brexit, and they want it now without any agreement with the EU, because basically Juncker has demonstrated that he's simply a drunk who is put onto a pedestal because when he's sober, he'll read from the appropriate script. And why does he get drunk so often? Probably because he knows that he's leading a life of deception. He knows he's not in control. He knows that he is simply regurgitating the will of the global corporatists. And, you're going to have to answer for that one day. It may not be on this mortal coil, but, someday you're going to have to stand before Anubis and account for your actions. And your actions have certainly not been in the best interests of the people of the European Union. And, of course, we see that right now in Catalonia and in France, and we see the magnitude of aggression and outright brutality to which the EU will stoop to maintain the corporatist agenda. So, the good news is that the UK has an opportunity. Now, in the first instance, it's got to be to get out of the EU. But then the real challenge begins, because there's no question that coming out of the EU into the hands of, say, the Brexit Party or even Boris is going to be out of the frying pan into the proverbial fire, because they will simply be looking to, instead of having a relationship with the EU, tie in with the US. Now, the reality is that obviously the corporatists would see this as an opportunity to lower standards right across all sectors, whether it's food, whether it's energy, whether it's pollution, whatever. The US would look to be driving a reduction in standards, and it will be down to the will of the people. So in the short term, yes, there's no question that Farage has tapped into a very rich political vein here, which is get the country the hell out of the EU without any strings, and certainly retaining the control of the British military. And Nigel Farage has to be held to account on this. Since I made my comments on Monday morning, I received a number of emails saying, no, Farage is very much anti-EU military unification. Yeah, but it's not exactly at the forefront of his political spiel, is it? And in fact, it's rumoured that there has been a memo put around the Brexit Party that during the Peterborough campaign, do not get drawn on EU military unification because, and I quote, it muddies the water, which just goes to show that, there are certain issues that the Brexit Party has also decided to obfuscate. So here's the opportunity. The reality is the Brexit Party are going to storm it in Peterborough. But at the same time, Mike Green and Nigel Farage absolutely need to be held to account so that people know where they stand on issues such as EU military unification. And, I have to acknowledge the tremendous work of UK column, Brian Gerrish, Mike Robinson, and very much supported by David Ellis. And if you haven't yet seen David Ellis's outstanding AV10 presentation, then I encourage you to do so, and you can watch that on the alternativeview.co.uk website. So, a few other things are going on, and of course, David Noakes and Lynn Tyre very much in people's minds right now as Lynn Tyre awaits her extradition to France. Or does she? Because a common law court was convened last week in which the ruling of the corrupt Judge Supperstone was overturned, and the documents have been submitted to the court. But, gasp of surprise, the courts aren't responding. So the onus now is on all of us to put the pressure on the courts to do the right thing. Because the courts should be about justice, but we know that's not the case because, Judge Nicholas Lorraine Smith made it very clear that the courts are not there to rule on morality. They are there to rule on the law. Well, common law has precedent over unlawful legal courts. Legal meaning the undoing of God's law. So the courts need to respond to the correspondence from the common law court. And now there needs to be a hearing in the courts in which the common law ruling is effectively ratified. So I'm going to post the email address that you need to respond to. Hopefully it'll be under the YouTube, but if not, then check where this YouTube video is posted on Facebook. And I'll put the email address, which I encourage you to send an email to the court asking them to do the right thing and respond to the common law court correspondence and ratify the ruling that annuls Judge Supperstone's extradition order. Now, this is very, very important because, this is an opportunity for people in the UK to re-establish the supremacy of the common law courts. The courts run by the people, not the corrupt judiciary that are effectively carrying out the will of the corporatocracy, or in the case of the extradition order, simply bending over because the French judicial system has requested the extradition of Lynn Tyre, who of course did not face any charges here in the UK. Now, John Smith, who is very much the driver behind the resurgence of the common law courts, will hopefully be my guest on tomorrow night's episode of Humanity versus Insanity, and he will hopefully explain how this process needs to be working. So meanwhile, of course, David and Lynn are still in the UK, but David does have a number of court cases coming up, and one of which is his extradition to France, which is scheduled to be held next February. So anyone who thinks that if Lynn goes to France, that she's going to be released back to the UK, it's a very high risk strategy, because the likelihood is that the French judiciary will simply hold her on remand until they succeed in getting David extradited to France early next year. So all of that, of course, because the corporatocracy wants to suppress a proven cancer cure. And effectively the MHRA and the pharmaceutical industry, the MHRA being the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Agency, the pseudo government body that effectively acts as henchman for Big Pharma, they are determined to never let this cure or any other cure for cancer come to the market, because there ain't no money in health, but there's a shed load of money in keeping people sick, as was of course acknowledged by Goldman Sachs in their report of was it last April or April before, lose track of time, in which they acknowledged that curing people was not a sustainable business model. Well, talking of sustainable business models, one has to question how 5G will be sustainable beyond maybe taking backhanders from the pharmaceutical industry, because of the massive increase in cancers as a result of carcinogenic EMFs that are being unleashed right now in London, in Manchester, in Birmingham, in Edinburgh, in Cardiff and in Belfast. But the good news is that more and more people are waking up to the issue of 5G and the microwave technology, this military microwave technology that's now being unleashed on the civilian population. And a tremendous success in Glastonbury a couple of days ago, where campaigners there succeeded in getting the Glastonbury Council, Town Council, to agree to debating the issue of 5G. And a similar success in Totnes, where local campaigners there have approached the council and opened a dialogue with the council. And this now needs to be going on right across the country. And if you haven't yet downloaded and read through the constitution of your local authority, that needs to be your absolute priority, because in those constitutions it spells out the responsibility of the officers of the council and the councillors for the health, safety and well-being of their constituents. Now, some of them are already saying, oh, there's nothing we can do. It's a national infrastructure project. Well, that's a nice little way of sort of pointing in other directions and supposedly covering your own butt. But that ain't going to cut it. This is a killer technology. And we will see massive increases in cancers. And of course, there are an increasing number of academics and scientists who are calling for a moratorium on this rollout. And, you know, here's the call to people who invest in the telecoms companies. You know, it's the same with people who invest in the pharmaceutical companies. You invest in these companies because you are greedy, because your motivation is self-gratification, and you are looking for the returns from the dividends that you get by investing in those companies without a thought for the way in which those companies conduct themselves. So if you are an investor in the pharmaceutical industry, and if you are an investor in the telecoms industry, then you are directly contributing to an agenda that does not have the best interests of humanity at heart. So it's all to play for. You know, what's rolling out across the UK right now is not the ultimate solution. You know, Nigel Farage makes it very clear that he has every intention of effectively privatising the NHS. And, you know, I've heard as yet unconfirmed suggestion that Nigel Farage is actually a common purpose graduate. Now, I'd love to see that confirmed or, of course, denied. But, you know, it would explain a lot. You know, the man has been on point to get the UK out of the EU for the past couple of decades. But when he does, if he's still in the chair, then we will see yet more rampant corporatism. So, you know, it's one step at a time. Let's get ourselves out of the EU. Let's get control of the country, retain control of the military, and then let's start doing the right thing for the population of this country and not simply feeding the coffers of the corporatocracy. Well, on that note, it's getting a bit breezy up here. The tripod is taking a trip to the left here. Wind's coming in from the southwest, and probably time for me to go and enjoy a breakfast down in the beautiful village of Widdicombe. So you have a great day, and of course, if you are in Peterborough, then you know what you need to do tomorrow, and basically that is create the seismic shift and vote for Mike Green, for the Brexit Party, and let's see him get a return that the other parties could only ever dream of. But like I've said, that's not the be all and end all. That's just the first step on a very long and very tough journey. But, you know, it'll be a step in the right direction. And then, you know, we have to participate in the process to make sure that the people of this country are not continually treated as simple slaves to the corporation. As somebody who works in the airline industry said, you know, those people who travel in business class, we call them the haves, and those people who travel in first class, we call them the have-yachts. So, you know, that's who the likes of Farage are taking care of ultimately, the haves and the have-yachts. What we need to be doing is making sure that everybody is taken care of and everybody has a quality of life that right now is simply a figment of their musing. We have to bring that into reality. You have a great day, and I will see you on Friday morning when hopefully I'll be able to announce that the Brexit Party candidate, Mike Green, has won by a margin of over 50% in Peterborough. And let's see how that is dealt with by the two ex-main parties of this country. Well, you have a great day, and I will see you on Friday morning. But don't forget, if you have the opportunity, join me at 7:30 tomorrow evening for another episode of Humanity versus Insanity. You take care now.